All right, this morning we're going to read from the book of Romans, the 13th chapter, and we're going to look at verses 8 through 10. Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another. For the one who loves another, has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. May God add his own blessing to the reading and to the hearing of his holy word. Well, last summer, earlier in the summer, it's not been that long ago, has it? I was walking by some stores, and there was this opening, not an opening, but one of the storefronts had I don't remember the name of the company, but it was specializing in loans and services for churches, and that intrigued me. You don't often see that in a place like I haven't ever seen that before. Anybody go by? And I walked in, and the guy that was sitting at the desk, and I said I was intrigued by what you do, and he said, well, we help churches a lot of different things. You can subscribe to their services basically, and they will help you do everything from manage your money to set up ministries for everything. They provide a subscription service to run your church. Is basically what they do. And he says, he said we also try to specialize in helping churches get loans for building projects that can't otherwise qualify. I don't know what that meant. I went to a different place because he says, and we do all this on biblical principles. We do all this on biblical principles. So I said, so you loan money to churches without charging interest? Well, no, we don't do that. I said, well, that's what the Bible talks about, usury. We're not supposed to do that between Christian people. He goes, well, we have a process that seems to work. I mean, we didn't get anywhere with that, and I didn't press it, obviously. But it's interesting to me how sometimes we kind of pick and choose which parts of Scripture we might want to follow. The ones that are going to help us, serve us, make most sense to us, or whatever. And it interests me that seems to come out of not something in the Scripture, because I don't remember anything where Jesus or any of the laws or the prophets say anything about on the odd Tuesday, you can select your top 5 favorites, and the rest of them you don't have to worry about. There's nothing in there like that. It's presented to us as God's ways. This is what God asks of you. This is how you know God. This is how you learn. This is how you behave. All of those things. But we do have kind of a tendency to kind of pick and choose. We have this. We kind of will take care of ourselves a little bit sometimes. I want to kind of wonder where that comes from. And I was interested by this kind of sense that we have sometimes of and where does it come from, this idea of being more important than other people, kind of a self-serving nature of who we are and what we do, and it shows itself in so many different ways. I ran across. I like some of these talent shows, but I want to watch them on TV because they're full of ads and all this stuff, and I don't even want to watch all the acts, so I'll pick a few on YouTube. It's a lot easier that way. Well, I ran across this week a reaction video. This is kind of a new thing to me. Anybody ever heard of these reaction videos? You have, because you're a teenager, right? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Really? Actually, I'm glad to hear that. It's so bizarre to me. A reaction video means that there's somebody sets up a camera on themselves so that you can watch them watch something else. Yeah, Elsie's like, what? Are we supposed to really care what somebody else, how they react to something that they're watching? This was in particular, I don't know if you've seen the current season with America's Got Talent, this little 12-year-old girl named Darcy Lynn. You've seen her? This girl is unbelievable. She's incredible talent. And so there were two of these. I could not make myself keep watching them. I couldn't do it. I even thought about putting one of them on the screen just as an example. I was like, no, I'm not going to force these people to do something that stupid. But it's like they set it up. It's like, okay, we're going to watch. This is my reaction video for Darcy Lynn and her ventriloquist act, and so they turn the camera on and they watch. They put the act itself as a little inset in the screen, and then they film themselves, and then you get to watch them react. I don't know where to go with. How desperate are people for attention? How important is something? If I put my reactions to something out there, how important do I think I have to be for somebody to want to actually know what I look like when I look at something else? That just blows me away. I saw that. I don't remember this one girl's name. There are two guys. They call themselves the brothers. I think they are brothers actually. They look almost like twins. And I thought, does anybody actually watch these? They had like over 100 reaction videos that they've posted to different kinds of songs and things. And the only reason I know that is because when I thumbed through them a little bit, and toward the bottom of this little short list, it says, click here for 100 more. Okay. I didn't count to see if it was accurate. They have like 43,000 subscribers, and some of their reaction videos have like 150,000 people have watched them. Do we really need that much? Do we need that kind of attention? And I got to thinking a little bit more about how many people, I've talked to a couple of folks here and there, really have a couple of folks that, and it's like their best friends are on the internet. They've met them through games. They've met them through YouTube. They've met them through Facebook, where they don't know them any other way. But these are the circle of their best friends, or these people. And like, who are you connected to? Who are you actually connected to? Those aren't really people. I mean, not for you. We live in this world where there's people around us, and Paul is telling people something. And I know this doesn't seem connected yet, but it will be. Paul is telling people something about what it means to be connected to each other, about relating to people, about how important it is for us to be in a community of relationships, of friends, family, and so forth, and not separated from people by whatever else it is that seems important to us. We love our neighbor is part of that message. Loving our neighbor is part of that message. Not being so caught up in our own thing that we forget to pay attention to somebody else. And we have this tendency to take care of ourselves. We say it sometimes in ways like you can't. We say this in terms of friendships or family relationships. Sometimes you can't help them be happy if you're not happy, and it becomes a way of making so I can do what I want and take care of myself instead of someone else. Instead of love neighbor as self, instead of dealing in that kind of thing. We become defiant. Something that doesn't make me comfortable. It's something that makes me where or I get mad about something, or I don't know what else to do about it. We become defiant, and we kind of say, "I'm going to do my thing." I was just floored. I couldn't believe this. We're such a weird world. We live in such a crazy world. The hurricane's coming, right? So this one guy, the BBC picked this up, and all of a sudden it went viral, and he's planning to shoot the hurricane. He said he's basically out of frustration and boredom. That's what he told him. I'm kind of frustrated about it. I can't do anything about it. I'm bored. So as an act of symbolic defiance, he's planning to shoot the hurricane. And next thing you know, there's like thousands of people. There's Facebook pages of people who are planning to shoot the hurricane. And the police actually had to issue a warning, do not shoot the hurricane. And this made me laugh. Somebody at the BBC picked this one out. As one of the responses to this guy's thing was, "Won't that just make the hurricane matter?" I don't know. It is. we live in this culture and we've nurtured this. We've nurtured this in a way that I think has been unhealthy, where our personal freedom, our personal need to stand as individuals has become so strong that we have forgotten that we're supposed to be a part of community. We kind of get that in this church. We kind of get that in this church. We look after each other. We take care of each other. It's a beautiful thing we do like that. But even then, we have to be careful too. We have to, because this is not the only community we're a part of. And it is very telling, and it's very critical, I think, whenever you see this thing about love your neighbor in the Bible, and it's in the New Testament, is to always love your neighbor as yourself. And just the fact that means that there's relationship in that statement, to me says how important it is that we cannot be Christian alone. I've heard people that when you meet somebody, you meet a stranger and they find out you're a preacher, they go into they go into the preacher reaction mode. I used to go to church, or I used to be Methodist, or they'll explain why it's okay. I had a guy. I was a teenager. I was in high school, and I was with a friend of mine who's a pastor, who is actually a seminary student at the time, but he said, go with me down to he was doing a seminary project. He said, I need to go down to this hotel and just talk to somebody. And he had to write a report on it. So I went with him, and he gets his truck driver picked up. And when Greg explains what we're doing, and the guy says, I'll talk to you a little bit. So he's a truck driver, and he said, he goes, I don't go to church. I believe that there's a God, and I try to do good things. He said, I've been pretty good. He goes, I haven't done too many drugs. And he goes, I never stole anybody's wife, well, unless they wanted me to. That's what he said. It's like, so are we back to picking and choosing the rules? I pick the ones that I like, the ones that work for me, make sense to me, or the ones that I kind of want right now. So God says to us, and this is a huge part of this message, we are part of community that supports each other. And Paul alludes to the law here very strongly. We have this law, and he reels off a few of them. Do not steal, do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not covet. He puts those out there as these are part of why God gave us these, and God gives us these to live together with. It's not specific in this little 2 verses, but when we look at the law and the scriptures as a whole, this is where God says, this is where it's safe to play. This is the good place for you to be. Over the time, though, the people began to relate to the law more than they did God. The important thing to do in life was to live by the law, live by the law, live by the law. And, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a whole lot. If you can live by the law and all your friends can be on the internet. You can have all internet friends and not have and not kill somebody or not steal from them. You can follow the law that way. But it's more to it. God put people in community. Love God and love your neighbor as self. We're part of one another in that way. We belong to one another in that way. And the thing that here Paul says is if you love your neighbor as self, then you follow the law. Because love does not do wrong. And that's what the law is to do, is to help us live in a community and live in relationship to each other without harming one another, ways that build each other up. Love does not do wrong. First time I ever met Sundo Kim was 1991. Goes back a good ways, and he's retired, long retired. I mentioned him once or twice, but I don't know if you remember. He was the pastor of the largest Methodist church in the world. It was in Seoul, Korea. I think they got up to about, they were well over 100,000 members. Can you imagine a church that size? Every they want every week morning, 5 days a week, they had a morning prayer service at their church. And he says it this way. He says, we can only get 5,000 people there because that's all the room they had in their sanctuary. So they set them up in other places around. But he talked about what they did in those prayer meetings. He said, the first thing we do is pray for ourselves. Now, this is going to sound like for a second, it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but hang in with me. We pray for ourselves because if we are not in good health, we can't pray for health for others. But the key was that's not where it stopped. The key was now that, in other words, if I try to get my heart right, and I know this in my own prayer life, especially if I'm struggling with somebody or if I'm struggling with myself in some ways, or if I'm struggling with another person that I'm angry at or mad at, or someone's done something, or maybe I'm embarrassed because I've done something and I need to make up with them or whatever it is. If I don't deal with that, then my prayers are not balanced. They don't seem pure. They don't feel like that to me. So he's saying we've got to do that, but then he doesn't forget the other part of loving neighbor. So now that I am ready, now that I have cleared my soul in this moment of prayer, now, God, how can I pray for this person? What can I do to help this person? Loving neighbor as self. You don't love self more, you don't love neighbor more. Even psychologists have said that balance is important. If we love ourselves too much and not the others enough, it makes us kind of more on the narcissistic side of things. If we love others more than we love ourselves and we put too much emphasis there, we get more into that codependency kind of things where we need people we create a need and it becomes very unbalanced. The balance is perfect. Love neighbor as self. In that, we don't do wrong to others. We only do what we think is best. That doesn't make us perfect people, but it makes us better people. And it helps keep relationships at a kind of an honesty point, I think, where we have the courage and the honesty to talk with each other when something isn't right. Or when we have a disagreement about something. Because what's important isn't the disagreement or the point of that. What's important is the people. We live in a church. We're part of a church. And we know we're not a perfect church. But that hadn't stopped us being one, has it? We get frustrated about something. We voice it sometimes. But when we get done, we're okay. Because we connect to each other. And God's grace is a part of that. And the most profound ways I have seen this is in church settings or faith settings. Years ago, trying to remember the years, probably 1996. At any rate, it was a World Methodist Conference. I think it was in Rio. And a gentleman that was speaking to the group, he was from a West Pacific island. I don't remember what island it was, but he was in West Pacific Island. And he was talking about some of the struggles that they were having on an island, and it was because of Western nations. Ours was one of them. England was one, and some others were doing nuclear testing. This 20 years back, 96, something like that. They're doing some nuclear testing in the oceans nearby there, under the water. And he said, they keep telling us they're not doing it, and then they tell us if we were doing it, it wouldn't have any effects. But he talked about the fish washing up on the shore. He talked about what they've been eating and about the number of babies that are lost, childbirth babies situations, and how often mamas are sick when they're trying to take care of their families. And he went through some details. And the president of the World Methodist Council that year was Donald English, and he was from England. I thought that was kind of a fun little thing. But when this gentleman stopped speaking, when he was finished speaking, I was so impressed with what Don did. He stood up and he went to the gentleman, and he just walked up and he said, "I'm from one of those countries. And the only thing I know to do is to tell you I'm sorry. And he wrapped his arms around this man. Right there on the stage, right there at the podium, wrapped his arms around him. And the man embraced him back. It's not that Donald was responsible for what his government was doing, but in that bond of Christian faith and that common loyalty to Jesus, we find the power and the strength to overcome profound differences between people. To me, it gives me chills to sit in a room, and I've had half a dozen times I've been able to do this, and to hear the Lord's Prayer spoken by 60 languages at one moment. All these people saying the Lord's Prayer in their own mother language. And to realize that despite all these differences, we have this common ground. See, to me, this is why only Jesus will bring peace to the world. Only Jesus can bring peace to the world. Because only Jesus sought peace for the world. Nobody else talked about loving enemies. Praying for the ones who persecute you. Who is my neighbor? Jesus talked about the Samaritan, people that were hated by the Jews. He showed his grace. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, the woman in Tyre. He was at the cities up around Tyre and Sidon. He sent his disciples to make disciples of all the world. You'll start in Jerusalem and you'll expand until the whole world is a part of this. Loving neighbor as self, it's much more than just me and you, or me and a family member, or me and a friend, or us to each other. It's about a world. But it does start here. The world's pretty overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. So start here. God, help me to love you. Love God first, right? Help me to love myself and my neighbor in the ways that you want. How can we serve each other? Don't expect perfection. Expect love, support, helpfulness, friendship, honesty, and loyalty that allows us to speak truth in love to each other so that we help each other grow, so we build each other up and extend it. Extend it to the community. Whether you do that as a church, whether you do that just talking to somebody at a checkout line. Love your neighbor as self. And the world gets better. Amen.